In order to keep bringing you guys tons of free content, we work with brand partners who you'll hear from in this episode, including an advertisement from Zopa Bank. Welcome back to the Talk 20s podcast. Today, we're joined in the studio by mental health and exercise coach, Danny Williams. And this episode of the podcast is all about gaining self-awareness, resilience, confidence, and discipline in your 20s. Skills which are so hard to learn, but are so vital for adult life. As ever, please make sure you subscribe or follow the podcast. The team work tirelessly to bring you all the advice you need to navigate your 20s successfully, but we cannot do it without the support of you guys at home. So if you leave us a review, that would mean the absolute world to us. And if you screenshot it and email it to info@talk20s.com, we'll pop you one of our little notepads in the post. On with the show. Hi, Danny. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey.
It's amazing to have you here. You've come across from Leeds today. So a couple of hours train over to Liverpool. It's amazing to have you here. But you've been on quite the journey in your 20s. And one that we've kind of sort of saw at the very beginning on Love Island.
Right at the start of my 20s.
Literally right at the start of your 20s.
Yeah.
So let's take it back to Danny, age 20 before he went on Love Island. What was Danny like back then?
Oh, age 20, I was living in London and I was working as a full-time model. And something I say quite a lot when people ask me about this whole Love Island journey and how my life changed and all that kind of stuff. I am from a council estate in Hull, right? So me living in London, working as a model for big brands and all that kind of stuff, I was living the dream already. I was already living in a world which I didn't really feel too familiar. I was working for myself. I wasn't working for a company. I was self-employed. From where I came from, I was earning good money, I think. And so that kind of couple of years before Love Island, I was already really very grateful for where I was. So yeah, it took another giant twist when I went on TV.
How did the modelling thing come about? What that initial step that took you to London, how did that all come about?
I very much had that fairy tale story really where I got scouted in the street by a model agent at the time, and he basically took me to see a couple of different agencies, a couple of which I was familiar with, and I already kind of knew if I got to sign with them, that would be so cool. And long story short, I was working as a full-time bartender at the time up in Leeds at The Alchemist. That's where I was working full-time. And I loved that job too, by the way. I wasn't one of these people who was
Alchemist, great bar.
I wasn't broke and hated my 9 to 5. It wasn't that. I was already really happy with where I was at working in a bar. I was loving it. And I was sort of 19 at the time, 18, 19. And then when I got scouted as a model, it was like this, wow, I can go and live in London, live this new lifestyle, and experience a bit of what life has to offer kind of thing. And within 2 weeks, I'd quit my job and moved to London. When I say it now, it sounds a bit kind of courageous and brave and all that kind of stuff to move to London at that age. But I can't tell you how much of a no-brainer it felt like. Nobody could have told me it was a bad idea. I was like, I'm doing this. There's no one can tell me any differently.
Yeah.
Which when I look back now, I'm like, God, bit ballsy. I don't know if I'd do that now, to be honest. Ironically,
I think when you're younger, you're just what have I got to lose?
It's just fearlessness, but naivety at the same time.
Yeah.
Because moving to London, or moving to any city which isn't your normal city where you've got no friends and family, there's risk involved. You could have a bad time. Moving to any city, putting yourself out of your comfort zone comes with its obvious potential challenges.
Yeah.
But when I got the chance to move there, I didn't think of any of those things. I just saw, what have I got to
But also at
enjoy?
18, 19, 20, it's really normal to kind of move to a new city for university or something like that. So probably a lot of your peers were kind of doing similar things. Whereas I guess when you get later on into your 20s, it's not as normal. So I guess you probably were just if everyone's moving for uni, I can move for this job.
You know what, thinking back now just on the spot, what I think was probably the bigger fear than moving city and being out of my comfort zone was going from having an income every week and knowing what I'm going to get paid to then being self-employed and essentially having other people determine whether you're good enough to work or not. That was actually in the back of my head probably a bigger fear of I know how much I earn. If I work X hours, I get paid X. But if I move to this city and pursue this career opportunity, I don't know if I'm going to get booked by clients or not. I don't know if I've got a livelihood or not. And that was probably the naivety when I think back was probably not addressing that. I just went into it and assumed I was going to work. And
how did you find the modelling industry?
I was very lucky. I think I was very, very lucky because I, for whatever reason at the time, managed to work at a lot of these kind of e-commerce brands like the ASOS's and the JD Sports and that kind of, anyone with a website basically.
I've definitely bought a t-shirt for my other half that I bought that you were probably wearing for like
and you know
no-brainer.
In the politest possible way, there's a million people in the industry who looked just like me at the time.
Yeah.
So I probably entered the industry and they was just looking for tall mixed race guys who looked a certain kind of way. And luckily I just fit that description. So I hit the ground running and found it quite easy, to be fair, to start working. But I know it's not the same for all models. I was just very lucky in that respect. So I just found it quite easy. I think as well, a lot of the brands that I worked with were based in London, and I come down this like, I come down on the train from Leeds and I'm this like council estate boy from Hull, and I'm probably a bit different to the kind of people they typically work with. And I think maybe that helped me a bit because I was just something a bit different.
And then the Love Island call came in. Did you apply for Love Island or did they call you? Was it another they call you situation?
They contacted me, and they actually contacted me the year before as well. And I got quite close to doing it the year before. And for one reason or another, I just bottled it. Long story short, I bottled it. I thought my life's already a bit crazy at the moment. Like I'm still finding my feet. I'm not quite used to like living in London. Am I ready to then expose myself to TV? No. And I would have been 18 at that time, talking to Love Island about doing the show.
Wow, yeah.
And then when it came around the second time, I was like 19, about to turn 20, I think. Oh no, sorry, I made a mistake. I was 19 the first time, and then I was 20. So when I did the show eventually, I was 21. And yeah, so I'd said no originally, but then when it came around the second time, they had all my details. I'd spoken to them before. They knew they kind of wanted me to be on the show and stuff. And I think in that 12 months prior, I'd built up that confidence and that level of like, I feel comfortable enough to do this. It's still really scary, but you know what? It's kind of now or never. Why not just get out of my comfort? It's that thing of like putting myself out of my comfort zone again. I think when it happened the first time, I was like, oh God, that's too uncomfortable. Like I'm already pretty uncomfortable. So no, I'm good for now. And then when it came around the second time, I was like, right, this is an opportunity here to get out of my comfort zone and see where it takes me. And that's what I did. But yeah, I was 21 at the time, which when I think back now, wow, like how little about the world did I know when I did that? How little did I know about myself? I think at the time I thought I was mature for my age at 21, which I think to some extent I probably was, but ready to take on all of the stuff that comes with going on TV. Hell no. Hell no. And that kind of makes you grow up really, really quickly, which ultimately I'm grateful for. But at the time, no, it's a big shock.
So what was your experience like since Love Island? Like you've been on quite the journey now, because now you work like full-time in kind of coaching and exercise and mental health. But like, what's been your journey to get you to this point since the whole Love Island?
Yeah, it's been a journey to get here for sure. Like I said, the experience makes you grow up really quickly. And I would say fortunate that we went into a big pandemic where we had no pressure to do anything besides sit inside and think about life. Because really, until we was forced to do that, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had this big platform. I had all this expectation from other people, and more importantly, that I put, like from myself, that I put onto myself. And I was just like, oh God, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And it felt like every day of not doing, I was getting more and more in my own head. The pressure gets more and more. And then we're put into the situation where the pressure is just like a balloon that gets deflated kind of. And it was just like, we can breathe. And I moved back in with my dad actually, who is like the best person to spend time with when you're trying to find yourself kind of thing. Because we kind of bonded really, really well. I got kind of closer to him than I've ever been. And just a bit of context, I didn't really know him growing up. So I moved in with him in my late teens.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, it was an odd experience to kind of get to know your dad at that age.
Yeah.
But in a lockdown situation, it was really quite nice because we'd spend all our time together and it's like we never had time apart, even though we had years apart. It's quite strange. But yeah, that period for me was really, really critical and really pivotal because it gave me the platform and the freedom to really think deep about what I wanted to do, what impact I want to have, what am I going to do with this audience? Because there's people here following me who want to hear something. Like it's like having a microphone and just not knowing what to say. And yeah, through that period, I definitely rediscovered my love for fitness, rediscovered my love for like actually helping people in some capacity. Like I remember there was one day in lockdown where I was cooking loads of recipes. Basically every day I was trying a new recipe to make with my dad, and I'd like see if it worked. Sometimes it was rubbish, sometimes it was good. And I did one recipe and I thought, you know what, I'm going to put it on Instagram for the first time. I just made something, I can't remember what it was, but I put it online and I got a DM from a random lady who said, "Thank you so much for sharing this. Just made it for me and the family and the kids love it."
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a light bulb moment went off. And, you know, I don't mind saying this now because I've come a long way in that respect. But at the time, I really didn't see social media as a tool to help people. I didn't. I was 21 and I thought social media was just like this platform to like, I guess, project a version of yourself that you wanted people to perceive you as. Subconsciously, that's what I wanted. But then when I got that bit of external feedback of like, oh, this has helped some random person and her family, I was like, oh, right, okay, this is why people can do good on social media. And that really just led to like a kind of a domino effect of, right, how can I be more valuable? How can I explore this more? And then, yeah, being qualified as a PT, it just all kind of made sense to go down the coaching route. But it was definitely a journey to get from there to here. A big, big journey where like there's been fallbacks, there's been things that maybe if I could go back now, I wouldn't quite have gone down that lane or whatever. But it's all part of the process.
I know from chatting to you as well that you did quite like a lot of soul searching in COVID times, which I think not enough of us a lot of us did through COVID, but like I loved the way that you were kind of so honest and open with us about how hard that was for you as well. Because I think there's been a lot of people will look back at COVID and just think, oh, we were just locked indoors and we all drank too much, ate too much and did online workouts every now and again and went out for our walk. Like it was a crazy time, but I know for you that it was also quite a difficult time as well. Like I think our listeners would kind of love to hear probably a little bit more about that experience because a lot of us feel very alone in our 20s. Like we feel a lot of, shame that we should be doing X, Y, Z by this age, or pressure that we should be doing that, or, struggling with our identity and where we're supposed to fit in the world. And I know that you had a lot of those questions for yourself through COVID, but you're in a much better place now. So if you could share a little bit more about that, if you feel comfortable.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to. I'm luckily, I've come on from that and I can speak about that kind of time with as much honesty as you'd like. But for sure, that was without doubt the darkest period of my life where, I think for the first time I'd actually consciously thought about what mental health even is. I think until then, I only thought mental health was this like really dark subject which you only ever address if you're like really, really not well and you get like sectioned or something. But actually mental health is something which affects each and every one of us every single day, either positively or negatively. And I think for the first time in my life, I actually addressed the fact that I actually have a mental health, which either needs to be, which needs to be kind of tended to and maintained, and you have to do things to try and keep it positive if you can. But that period of kind of those darker days, if you like, when I had many more questions than answers, I struggled a lot. And again, I spoke about that kind of pressure I was experiencing. Most of it was self-imposed. And I was kind of piling that on and on and on and on. And it was only making things worse. And like I said, when we went through that period of kind of stillness and solitude, that was when I afforded myself the luxury to just sit and think, to sit and experience these feelings. And for sure, it wasn't like a 5-minute thing. It wasn't like a week of sitting and soul searching. It was months. It was months. Like I had days when, getting out of bed was like the biggest achievement for sure. And you just can't wait to go back to bed again. And you're just mentally fatigued, like I experienced that. And this is why I speak about lockdown in a positive way. I don't mean to be kind of, insensitive to people who really found that time, difficult because of COVID itself. But for me, it was like an opportunity to like just sit with all of this and process what I'd been through. Like the reality TV thing was huge for me. Of course, it's going to be a lot. It's going to create a lot of things which you need to think about consciously. You can't just like be like, right, that was fun, on to the next. Like, no, my life changed massively. And even before that, there was things which have happened in my childhood and teenage years that I'd never dealt with before. So that lockdown period where I'm like soul searching, quote unquote, it wasn't like a 5-minute thing. It was months. It was months and months and months and months. But yeah, for sure, I'm grateful for it still, because without that, I wouldn't be here today. I spoke about having to grow up really quickly. And when I think about this and I speak about it, I often think like, wow, I'm lucky I went through that at 21, 22. I think a lot of people go through that eventually, but they could be like 40 when they go through that. I think we talk about midlife crisis, and I sort of half-heartedly will say I went through a midlife crisis at like 21.
Yeah, well, the quarter-life crisis exists, I think.
Yeah, because it's like
a lot of young people have them.
Ultimately, it was like this crisis of who am I?
Yeah.
What do I stand for? And how do I want to show up in the world? Those are kind of the three questions I was asking myself, like, who the hell is Danny Williams? Like, I guess I've just been wearing this mask the whole time without realizing, desperate for external gratification, people pleasing and all that kind of stuff, which only through that period of solitude and therapy and things like that have I managed to uncover. But like I said, you can be in your mid 30s, 40s, 50s and then ask yourself these questions. And then it's like a horror show, right? So I'm really lucky I went through that at 21 because now I've got the rest of my life to try and do better,
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think from these experiences, you have been able to shape your whole life. And I know your coaching has kind of come through that. Tell us a little bit more about why you wanted to move into this space and why that was important to you.
Yeah, so first and foremost, training as a personal trainer or qualifying as a personal trainer was like, how can I turn my passion into a career? That was, like a lot of people do, right? It's like, what am I passionate about? What do I find fun? What doesn't feel like work when I do it? And I would find when I trained with people, I ended up being a PT without even realizing. I love that kind of, I love that role of like, let me show you how to do something so you can be better. And I just naturally find that, that comes really naturally to me. And so qualifying as a PT made the most sense. The transition from being a PT on the gym floor to now being a mental health and exercise coach, that was an interesting one because I think first thing, it was like, how can I use my own personal experience to help my clients and deliver more value to them? And if I've been through all this, which I just spoke about, and then come out the other side of it, there's like a golden nugget of information I can help other people with. Not everyone's got my experiences, but boy, everyone struggles at some point. And if I can help people who are struggling, brilliant. And then secondly, it wasn't till about sort of a year and a half, 2 years after I did my PT course where I stumbled across an additional qualification called mental health and exercise coaching. And I did this course and it was like an eye opener in every aspect because for one, I was a relatively new PT and I didn't have much experience. So a lot of those traditional values you see in a lot of PTs who have been working for many years, I didn't have those values there because I was new. I was like a baby. I was like a blank canvas. So taking on what I learned from this course about people's mindset and mental health, how mental illnesses can present themselves physically in people's bodies, people's general barriers to exercise and things like that. I didn't know any of this before. So I'm just taking this on like a sponge, like, wow, 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 wow.
Where are you storing your savings right now? Just a quick one from our sponsor, Zopa Bank, home of the Smart Saver account. Zopa Smart Saver lets you save in different pots at different interest rates, depending on the notice period you choose to access your savings. The bigger the notice period on your pots, the bigger the interest rate. To find out more about the Zopa Smart Saver, download the Zopa app. We need to tell you that boosted interest pots are subject to a notice period, the longest of which is 95 days for the highest interest rate. You need to save a minimum of £1 and the interest is paid monthly and is subject to variation.
And then I step into the industry and I see A, very few coaches are applying these things. And B, a lot of the clients that I could be working with aren't aware of these like invisible issues that they're actually facing. I think a lot of people try to get in shape and they actually know how to get in shape, but there's so many blockers which are like invisible to them. And then when they can't figure it out, they blame themselves. They get the shame, the guilt. I'm not good enough. He can get in shape and I can't. I don't know why. And for me, it was like this, why aren't more people speaking about this and trying to, make a difference? So yeah, that's where that transition came from. And I think I said this to you before when we spoke. When I started applying some of the things that I learned, the results I saw was instant. And now it's like it's not just, I think mental health is seen as this like niche subject within health and fitness. It's like this, you can specialize in like, postnatal, or you can specialize in like kickboxing or yoga and like, but mental health makes up half of your health. Like it is literally 50% of your entire health. So it's not like this little niche subcategory. It's like you got your physical health and you got your mental health.
Yeah.
And if I'm not tending to people's mental health, I feel like I can't make them healthier. Even if you get in great shape after leaving my program, you could be leaving me worse off than when I found you. That's just genuinely for me, it's like a no-brainer. But I think a lot of the fitness industry hasn't quite clocked onto that yet. And I think that's where I want to have the biggest impact. If I can help the industry change a little bit, even just a little bit, then I'd be happy.
It's great work that you're doing. And I know that like you have 4 pillars that you specifically help people with. And I'd love to chat through them on the podcast if that's okay. Because I think listening from a listener's perspective, they'll probably think, maybe I could improve this about my life, or maybe I could look at something in a different way. So the first one of your 4 pillars is all about self-awareness. What are your main things you talk to and you speak about with your clients when you think about learning and improving self-awareness and how that can help your health as a whole?
Yeah, I think there's many different ways you can look at self-awareness. For me, in a simple way, I like to define it as the sort of the inner dialogue you have with yourself. And how can we turn the volume up on that dialogue? I think we are in constant conversation with ourselves. Every single person is, but not everybody can hear what we're saying. And if we can find a way to turn that dial up, we're generally going to be in a better position to face life, to live in this external world.
Do you think some people are scared to turn that dial up?
I think some people are scared to turn the dial up. I think some people, without realizing, have created coping mechanisms to turn the dial down. But I think the vast majority of us, that inner dialogue's negative. And that probably is why we've turned the volume down.
Yeah.
And sort of helping people to accept that it's okay to have this sort of negative dialogue. How can we try and make it a bit more positive? That you actually like listening to it. That's sort of the what underpins it. And where I'm coming from is like, anybody who improves their self-awareness and has more kindness and compassion to themselves are better positioned to deal with life, because life can be crap. That's like one of the guarantees of life. Like, you're going to deal with things like grief, with loss. You might get dumped. You might lose your job. Right? These things are going to happen to almost everybody. In fact, they happen to everybody. Like, you can't get out of life without experiencing some kind of down day or negativity. And if you're going to face that with a bit more self-awareness, chances are you're going to be better equipped to deal with it. So why aren't we and I'm not this like self-awareness guru, by the way. This comes from experience. This comes from, I've been in bad situations where I didn't understand myself. The volume was turned right down and I handled the situation poorly.
I've been the same.
Like,
that was me
I'm not
pre
this,
all
like,
of
yeah,
this.
I'm not this guru. I'm like, wow, I used to handle certain things really bad because I didn't know myself and I didn't know how to turn the volume up.
Yeah.
So like, how can we kind of do things to turn the volume up and be okay with what we're hearing, you know?
I think that's totally normal. I think every young person, or, you know, maybe people don't ever learn this stuff in their life, but like, we can react and respond in a certain way because we are just ignoring stuff that is like really going on. Like, for me, I'm the same. Like, ever since I started like understanding a little bit more and being more self-aware and like listening to myself more and going to a little bit of like therapy and all that kind of stuff, challenges have still come my way. Like, life is still hard. There are still really difficult things that I face, but it doesn't feel as hard to get over that hurdle. Like, before, I think I used to get tripped up by way smaller things, and it used to play on my mind. I used to think really negatively. I used to be very pessimistic. But like now, like, those things don't trip me up anymore because of like the self-awareness things. It's amazing how it actually works.
Yeah, I think we're always striving to make our lives more perfect and to reduce the amount of obstacles that we end up facing.
Yeah.
But I think you're just constantly losing it's like an uphill battle for everyone.
Yeah.
Like, life will happen to you. Like, it's going to, a lot of people say like, you know, life happens for you and not to you. And I get the value and the sentiment, but life will happen to you, whether you're like, there'll be some points where it's like, God, I didn't expect that. That's rubbish. And it's like, how can we, armor ourselves with the tools and the resources and the skills to be able to navigate those situations, which are inevitable. It's not like, how can we stop the thing from happening? It's like, no, what can we do inside? Just forget about the external world for a sec. What's going on in the inner world? How can we, like I said, armor ourselves to deal with those situations?
And I think that links in really nicely with your second pillar, which is resilience, which I think is an underrated skill. And I think a lot of, and I don't know how you feel about this, but a lot of employers say that like Gen Z, they're not resilient. They're like snowflakes. That's like a lot of people, like, you know, Piers Morgan likes to say, the next generation, they're snowflakes and stuff. I don't think we are. I think we're a resilient bunch, some of us. Like, but why do you think that resilience is so important?
I think resilience is so important because if you don't have it, and it links to the first thing, right? Like, you're going to face challenges where if you haven't got resilience, what are you going to do? Like, you can't just, you can't get out of this life having not faced seriously difficult situations. And if you go into those situations without resilience and you give up on day one, you're not going to be able to reap the rewards that life has to offer you. You're just going to be chasing this low-hanging fruit constantly because you don't need resilience in order to get it. Like, I think that's probably why this conversation about Gen Z having less resilience is cropped up because we live in this like instant gratification world
Yeah.
where dopamine's so easily accessible, and maybe it didn't used to be as accessible. Like we're all addicted to TikTok and Netflix and fast food and all that kind of stuff. We're conditioning our brains to live in a world where resilience is a luxury. We don't need it. But previous generations absolutely needed resilience. Like it was a non-negotiable, right?
Yeah,
And
you had to go to Blockbuster to return your film, and then you had to wait for the next one to come out. Like that's resilience, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And for me and my clients, I think we build resilience by consciously putting yourselves in difficult situations, which you know you can overcome, but they will be challenging. Like challenging but achievable situations that you can get out the other side of and gain strength from. So then it's not this like airy fairy concept where you're just born resilient. Like, no, we can go out and cultivate it. Like we can actually create it. Like, you know, if you've got an individual who like, you know, their family was like affected by an earthquake, right? It's an incredibly serious situation. Their resilience levels are going to be through the roof if they got through that alive, like through the roof, because they dealt with adversity and came out the other side. And now they've got this stack of proof that they can deal with hard situations. Like it's unequivocal. But if you've got an individual that's just like, right, Netflix, YouTube, like TikTok, and it's just constant, there's no proof that you can deal with adversity. And I think with the gym and workouts specifically, it's on a micro level, but it's still adversity. Like if you're pushing yourself to your absolute limits and you're doing things which you at one time in your life you thought wasn't possible, that's going to build resilience. That's going to give you that resilience to then face the real life challenges.
Yeah, I love that. Your third pillar that you talk a lot about is confidence, which I think is probably the number one thing that we get asked about at Talk 20s. It's like, how do I grow my confidence? How do you grow your confidence?
This is such a hot topic right now as well, isn't it? Confidence. And when I say confidence in self and in body. So there's like body confidence and that kind of, you know, body appreciation, if you like. And then there's that confidence in who you are and what you stand for. And when it comes to body confidence, I'll start there because I think this gets misconstrued. I don't mean just like looking in yourself in the mirror and be like, wow, I am absolutely like 10-10. Like it's not that. It's like, I think true body appreciation comes from, and body confidence comes from a recognition of what your body's capable of achieving, not what it looks like and how other people can perceive it. Like there's some people who are handicapped in wheelchairs who have much higher body confidence than runway models. And it's not because one looks better than the other. It's because one recognizes what their body's still capable of doing. And the other one just sees it as this like vehicle potentially to project this version of themselves so that people can perceive them in a certain kind of way. And when I talk about body confidence with my clients, one of the biggest goals with most people is how can we take emphasis away from your body image? That is ironically one of the biggest ways to improve body image. Because people come through the door thinking I need to lose weight. And when I lose weight, I'll look like this. And when I look like this, I'll feel like this. And often it's not the case at all. It's like if we take the emphasis away from what you look like, focus on your lifestyle, focus on your habits, focus on your values and living in alignment with those values, then you'll feel like how you want to feel. And ironically, you'll probably lose weight as a byproduct, probably faster.
It's mad, isn't it? Because I think we're all guilty of going back into that cycle. I certainly am of like, you know, even though, you know, I feel like I step into this world where I understand what you're saying. I don't know if it's like society or stuff like I still fall back into these ways of like, gosh, if I lost X amount of weight, I'd feel much better. Like, and I don't know what it is because it isn't that. It's so much deeper than that. And I know that for you, when you scratch the surface with your clients, that's probably, you come to understand like the real reasons why they're actually wanting to get fitter and wanting to look a certain way and type of way. And it's probably way deeper than that. But I think with everything that you kind of do, like the biggest thing about the gym is that it requires, or exercise, it requires a lot of discipline. And I think that's hard when you step into adult life because for years and years and years, we've, you know, been brought up by whoever has cared for us, parents, guardians, grandparents, whoever's raised us, right? And usually they're, and teachers and stuff, they're the ones that have put in the discipline. But I think when you then leave and step out into adult life, it's usually on us to bring the discipline in. And then for a lot of people, that just goes out the window. You start cooking for yourself. It's you who decides if you have McDonald's for dinner or if you have a salad. Like that, it's difficult. I think it's really interesting that this is such a big part of what you kind of coach in. But I'm really intrigued to know how you do coach in discipline.
Yeah, when you say discipline, I think of all like I don't want to say it, but I find it toxic. Like a lot of toxic content I see online when it comes to discipline and like this hustle culture we see online and stuff like that. And I think, you know, when I say the word discipline, I think of a story. My friend Jamie, shout out Jamie, he told me about when he speaks about discipline. And he says, when you was little and you had to brush your teeth and you hated brushing your teeth, like for whatever reason, it was like you sat watching TV, probably watching The Simpsons or something, and your mum says, right, upstairs, time to brush your teeth. It was always, no, I don't want to brush right? Your mum made you do it.
Yeah.
And eventually over the years, it become a habit that you actually are so glad that you have, and you are disciplined enough to do it every day. And it requires, you haven't got to convince yourself, you just have the discipline to do it because you understand that it actually helps you. And it provides, some kind of value to your life. And when it comes to exercise in the gym, and in particular coaching, I think discipline is about giving that same tool to people. It's like, how can I help you just do it for a bit until you become independent enough to not require my help anymore? And there's no shame in lacking discipline, especially at the start. Like if I'm trying something new, which I don't like to do, discipline's going to be hard to come by until you've got consistency, which you might need help in order to develop. So yeah, discipline, when you say kind of how do you build discipline, I think for me, the biggest thing I can think of is helping people feel like they're not doing it on their own, especially at the start. Because when you're embarking on something like a health and fitness journey, which can be so daunting and so scary, if you're doing that on your own and you're not, you haven't got accountability from somebody else or from a coach or even from a friend or anybody, it's so much easier to give in to those short-term needs, like I'll just have a takeaway, I'll just skip the gym, or like I'll just have McDonald's or whatever. But when you've got someone on your team who wants what's best for you and they've got your best interests at heart and they say, maybe you should not have McDonald's tonight because you told me at the start that you wanted to achieve X, Y, Z. Guess what happens? You become more disciplined. And it takes a bit of time. But I think for me, accountability is probably the biggest factor. Because people want to be disciplined. It's not like this trait nobody wants. Like we want to be disciplined. It would make our lives easier, right?
Yeah.
But it's so hard to cultivate. And I think we try and do it on our own sometimes when really all we need is a bit of support.
And I think once you start to learn about discipline in one area of life, maybe it is health and fitness, it probably starts to like have taken effect in other areas of your life. We talk a lot about like managing your finances and stuff like that in your 20s as well. And I think like if you can start to be good and disciplined in one area, you can then maybe start to like manage how much you spend on, whatever per month and stuff like that. It's a skill that is like, it helps in every area. So I think it's something that we need to be like consciously aware of. One of the things I did really want to chat to you very briefly on the podcast about is the fact that like as a guy, we rarely hear people talking like you're talking. Like it isn't very common. Like guys feel much like less okay with opening up, but most of your clients are guys. So tell us from your perspective, like why you think it's so important to be talking about these things.
You know what, as well, just on that, when I speak to guys who work with me, they are so relieved to speak to me about these types of things because they've been bottling it up for so bloody long. Sorry, that's kind of saying
it's
for
great.
so bloody long. Like, and it's like, finally, I can just say how I really feel. So to answer your question, like, why is it important? Because we shouldn't be bottling up how we feel all the flipping time. Like, we have all this, bubbling up inside of us, and if it just stays there, like, it's gonna manifest itself in some kind of way. And for me, it's like it's okay to have bad days. It's okay to feel rubbish. It's okay to have moments where you're not quite 100%. It's okay to get things wrong, And if you just ignore that and suppress it and bottle it up for months and maybe years, there's gonna be some kind of negative effect attached to that.
Yeah. And
for me, like when I work with guys and I help or I try to help people kind of own that, it's like a relief. It's like a release of energy from their body. Like even me in my personal experience, right? In therapy, I thought I was going to therapy to try and address what, I won't go into detail, but I went for a specific reason to address a certain issue.
Yeah.
And then in doing so, I uncovered other issues that I didn't realize I actually needed to work on. And when we started to get to those issues and speak about them and articulate them and verbalize some of these things, which before then was just emotions trapped in my body somewhere, it's like an energy is released and you just feel like a weight's lifted off your shoulders that you didn't even know was there. And I think it's not just for guys, for everybody. If you've got stuff in there which feels like a weight on your shoulders, try get that stuff out of there. Like try release it, because you'll feel so much better for it.
100%. That conversation kind of leads really nicely onto my next question. And I think it's one of our core like values at Talk 20s is like, we believe that like nobody's perfect. Nobody's the finished product. Like people might look at you online and be like, oh, I really want to be Danny, look like Danny, have Danny's life and stuff like that. But we all know from speaking to so many experts and people who sit on that sofa that no matter where anyone is in life, they are working through something and they're trying to get better at one thing in their life right now. For you, what is that one thing you're trying to improve or work on in your life?
Yeah, and just before I answer that as well, like I used to be that guy who tried to project this perfect life. For so long, I was like, you know, I would get anxious about posting content because it didn't look perfect.
Yeah.
Or because like, you know, my front room wasn't spotless and you can see in the background the cushion's not quite right, or, you know, my outfit isn't the best outfit, or whatever, I needed a haircut. I was a few days late for a haircut. And it would put me off making content because I was so concerned with projecting myself as this perfect person with a perfect life. And since I accepted the fact that I'm just a bloody human being and life isn't perfect, and, you know, even now on a podcast, if I stutter by accident, like that used to trip me up so much, and I get in my own head and be like, oh God, I can't speak on camera and all those kind of things. But it's so okay. Like you said, nobody's perfect. And I think it's important people like myself and yourself with an audience, like send that message as much as possible, because that fear of not being good enough and that fear of not being up to the standard, I think is set by people who are in this position with audiences and influence who aren't honest with it, like I used to be, who aren't saying regularly enough, like, no, life isn't perfect. No, I am in therapy. Now I'm going through this. Now I made a mistake here. I think it's important that we send that message. But yeah, one thing that I'm working on at the moment, do you mean like personally that I'm working on, or do you mean like in career, or like, sorry?
It can be whatever area of life. It can be something that you're personally trying to improve in your life. It can be something that's career related, but something that you know you're not the finished product with and you know needs your attention.
Oh, that's a really good question. I'll try not to think too much. I'll give you 3 things. So first one, and I started this kind of journey, if you like, last year, was to get better at public speaking. It was something I used to hate. I used to hate speaking to a camera, you know, like walking around with your camera on selfie and talking to the camera. I used to hate it so much. And speaking on podcasts and that kind of stuff. But I knew inherently that at some point in my life, I'd need to be good at it, because I do want to build a business. I do want to work with teams of people. And if I can't speak to groups of people, I'm not going to be able to do those things. So that was one thing that I wanted to get better at quickly. And I am definitely making progress. I'm not as bad as I used to be. And when I say bad, I don't mean like the skill of speaking. It's more like just how I feel when I do speak. Like that little voice in the back of my head that's criticizing the way I say everything is diminishing over time, which I'm really happy about. Second thing I'd say I'm working on is, as I said before, my business. So I launched my online business last year. So I went from being a kind of in-person personal trainer on the gym floor to then working with people online. And I'm really just hyper-focused right now on making that as valuable as possible for people that I work with. I'm really trying to make my mark in the industry as somebody who isn't your typical online coach. I think just the word online coach gives me the ick a little bit. Like I hear the word, I'm like, oh God, everyone's a flipping coach these days.
They are.
And so I'm really trying to make what I do different and have as big an impact as possible with people that I work with. And that was something I was trying to do from the onset, but I feel like as time goes on, it's becoming more and more important to me that people really do leave my program transformed. Like that word is thrown around all the time, like, you know, transformation pictures and I want to transform my physique and that kind of stuff. But I think transformation starts from the inside. And if you can transform somebody from the inside out, that is really a goal worth going for. So that's probably my second focus. And then third one, we spoke earlier about content, and we also spoke about Alex Hormozy and his content and stuff like that. And he said something which really spoke to me on a podcast I heard a while ago. I don't know if it's his original words or if he took it from somebody else, but he said something along the lines of, make your free content or your content you post online better than what other people are charging people for. And that really stuck with me, of like, give out for free what other people actually charge for. And for me in my social media, I'm not there yet at all. but I'm really focusing on making my social media content as valuable as possible. So people are like, flipping heck, like, he does all this and he's not really getting paid for it.
Yeah.
I don't hardly do any brand collaborations. I used to do quite a bit, especially when I first got a platform and that kind of stuff. Like you do the dance and you work with certain brands and that kind of stuff. But that's not valuable to anybody. That's for me, it's just, if I see an ad, I swipe past it. Just seeing the word ad, I'm like, oh God, here we go, you know? So I'm very kind of select with who I work with, but even more so now, like I'm working with less and less to the point where it's like I hardly work with anybody. And I want my socials to just be like this platform where people can consume valuable content and not leave feeling triggered or like it's some kind of toxic thing. Because I think anyone with a business naturally will be scared about giving too much away for free. I understand the mindset of like, oh, if I give them all my secrets, then what they're going to pay for kind of thing. And I'm really just trying to lean into that, like what you put out there, you will in some other way receive.
100%.
So with my content specifically, it's like, right, even though I speak to my clients about this, I'm going to put it out on the internet for free anyway. And it just gives me that kick up the butt to give my clients more and be more valuable. And I think if I apply that tactic across the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, I want to be at a point where like the value is just through the roof.
Can't wait to see like where things take you. And it's been amazing to chat with you on this podcast. I could genuinely chat to you for hours about this stuff because I think it is like a breath of fresh air. No, I think it is a breath of fresh air. I really do think the work that you're doing is amazing. And no doubt, I'm sure we'll have you back on the podcast sometime soon. But we always end the podcast with the same question that we ask all of our guests. And it's if you could look back at 20-year-old Danny and just give him one piece of advice that would see him through his 20s. This is pre-Love Island. What would you say to him if you could just say one thing?
I would say don't rush. I think when I was 20, I was determined to have it figured out by like 21. By next year, I'll be doing this, this, and this, which will lead to this, and then my life will be sorted. And I think if I could, you know, if 20-year-old me walked in now and sat here, I'd be like, dude, just don't rush. You know, there's this, and it probably starts from school, right? Like you're meant to leave school and get the job, which gets this income, which then attracts this partner, and life is all figured out. And I think it's a bit of a fallacy, really. Like, I wouldn't want my life to go like that now. Like now I'm 25. I think by 30, I might be in a different industry. Who knows?
Yeah.
I might start a new hobby, which could lead to this. I might meet this person and it leads to that. And then when I'm 40, I could start a company in a different industry. And I think when you're 20, you don't think like that. You think of how can I shorten the journey as much as possible in order to get the result? But for me, I'm like, wow, can I just like extend the journey as much as possible and sod the results? Like, because I'm, you know, it's funny how that mindset kind of switches. But I think 20-year-old me was just like, right, you know, I need to do this and do this and then do this. And I'm just spinning all these plates. And at the end of the day, I'm not really that happy with everything. Whereas now I'm like really focused on doing less, but doing it better. And I've found much more happiness in that route. So I guess, don't rush would be my advice.
Amazing advice. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've loved chatting to you.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
It's been amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.